In my world of SEO and websites, I'm generally thinking more about long form written content when I think of content. It's not the only kind of content that you could even publish on your website. The things that I can create as assets on my website that will serve me for the long term, because I think SEO is a long term game. The biggest wins in SEO when it comes to driving meaningful, significant traffic from Google are going to come from topics where lots of people have a problem that they often go to Google to solve. Whatever it is that you think you want to do, start writing it down and publishing, put it in public, and start doing it. The path will make itself clear.
Welcome to the Say Cheese podcast. Today we've got Cory Potter on our edition from Fuel Your Photos. I'm going to let Cory talk a little bit about who he is, what he does, because he probably knows himself better than I do. So Cory, if you want to go ahead and jump in and just give us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're so awesome.
Wow, that's a hard task. Well, I guess right now the main thing that I do is help photographers. I teach about search engine optimization, but my goal, like kind of beneath that, is to help photographers love using their websites. Because in my mind, a website is such a powerful tool in any business, but especially in a photography business. I feel like if you really understand how to use your website effectively and you enjoy doing it, you're likely to do it more. And I think that's a really good thing. So I started Fuel Your Photos maybe 2015, 2016. Really, my thought process was I had some background in web development and SEO, but then I started a photography business. I used that knowledge to like really grow my photography business, and it was very successful. But as we were sort of getting out of wedding photography just for family planning reasons, um, I felt like there was a lot of bad advice in the industry, and I wanted a place where I could do experiments and help people and show evidence of why I believe this is true, or just kind of talk about SEO in a more, um, I guess, authoritative way, like to give real examples specifically for the photography industry. So that's what we've been doing ever since with Fuel Your Photos.
Sure, I've got a couple questions. So, this is a dumb question, but maybe I'm just really curious about it. How did the name Fuel Your Photos come about? What's the origin story behind that?
Oh man, it's been so long. I can't remember like exactly the thought process I was in at the time. Naming something's always hard, but the idea was that I saw so many photographers who had great work, but were having a hard time finding the people to see that work and to get bookings. And the idea was like, hey, let's pour some fuel on the fire and like get things going for you, like get more leads.
I feel like that's such a universal problem for photographers in general. Photographers are amazing artists, amazing creatives, and inside that space, they know what they're doing. But once you translate that into, hey, photography needs to be a business as well. If you want to do this as an actual gig, like not something more than just your passion, that's where people struggle because oftentimes, how do you study photography? It's by being a better photographer, but to take the time and to understand that you need to run a business first is a challenge for a lot of people. So I definitely see where Feel Your Photos came about. You said you used to be a photographer. So are you no longer photographing weddings? Have you transitioned completely out of that? Are you now just 100% educator? What's your deal?
Yeah, I have transitioned completely out of being a professional photographer. Although I just went to WPPI, and man, I'm like this close to like jumping back into it a little bit at least. I haven't completely like given up on how much I love doing photography. Especially, I love working with couples. So I was primarily a wedding photographer, and I don't know. I want to bring some of that back, but I have not since I guess the year after our last child was born. I have stopped doing wedding photography and now do education. So I have the SEO course, but also just consulting and some web development and things like that. Just trying to create tools and resources for photographers at this point.
God, Lily and I were just at WPPI, so I'm really not upset, but exactly. How do we not even cross paths? I guess there's so many people there and so many things going on. We just miss each other in the mix, but that would have been a fun opportunity to cross paths. But I think it's a really important thing you mentioned is that serving photographers, like how can you help them build better businesses and get more leads, get more inquiries? So I would love to take that as a point to dive into like little, maybe not everyone's so familiar with what is SEO, what is content strategy. So maybe we can dive into a little bit like, hey, what the heck is content, As a photographer, does that mean a photo? Does that mean a blog? What are we talking about really?
It's funny. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because that word is used so much. Content marketing, content creation, content creators. In fact, at WPPI, a lot of the talks where people were, speaking about content and content creation was more about social content like Instagram and creating stories and things like that. Um, in my world of SEO and websites, I'm generally thinking more about long form written content when I think of content. It's not the only kind of content that you could even publish on your website, but when I'm trying to think of like what are the things that I can create as assets on my website that will serve me for the long term, because I think SEO is a long term game. I think it's something that you're doing now because it will have significant payoff down the road, and often it lets people get organic leads without having to pay for new leads every time. Creating those assets, the things that are going to continue to drive traffic, is what I'm thinking of when I think of content. Generally, this comes in the form of something that is going to be helpful in solving a problem for a specific audience. So that's generally what I'm thinking of when I think of content.
So when we think of like great long form written content, we think of like useful, valuable blogs. That could be an avenue to pursue it. So it's more than just, taking my wedding from last weekend and posting the pictures and being like, that's a wrap. So we're talking about something a little bit further than that. So it's like content with a strategy, and content meaning like value for your audience, for your clients, right?
Yep. It's interesting because in the photography space, sometimes taking the wedding that you shot last weekend and putting it on your blog and calling it a wrap is great content. Like sometimes that's what people are looking for. They just want to see a wedding at a specific venue and they want to see one real example of it. And that is something that some people out in the world actually want and are looking for. Sometimes people will take it one step further and they will potentially optimize that post for a specific location or venue where they aren't just posting the photos, but they're saying, here's what this was like working at this venue with these vendors, something else unique about the weddings. They'll write about that as, again, a way to be helpful to the potential reader. But generally, those still aren't the kinds of things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking of writing a blog or writing some new content. I am thinking more along the lines of, um, you know, what are the best places to get married at Lake Como? Something like that, where if I'm in a research phase, I'm trying to solve a problem, I'm trying to get some answers. I have a resource from an authoritative source that I trust or that I can trust from like reading it. I feel like it's written well. And photos can be a good way to kind of back that up. That's kind of more of what I think of. I don't know. I guess both have a place, right? And I think for a photographer, something that I'm often telling people is you should be putting your work on your website as a way to make up a portfolio over time. I think if you were to post, most of your sessions or weddings and not worried about search engine optimization, but more creating something that you can refer to that can kind of back up the other things that you're writing. I think that's still important. I just think the biggest wins in SEO when it comes to like driving meaningful, significant traffic from Google are going to come from topics where lots of people have a problem that they often go to Google to solve.
I think that's where photographers perhaps have a disconnect. Sometimes we feel like an image speaks 1,000 words, so we don't need to necessarily solve a problem or write something valuable. Like our images are powerful enough by itself, and I feel like that's the trap photographers fall into because the photo by itself is not going to get you found. Like what's the value of a photo if no one ever sees it? It's kind of that question, like the chicken or the egg, right? And so I feel like when you start to combine like an actual content strategy with actual SEO, like what are people searching for? That's how you get your work noticed. And I feel like, as Lily and I started our photography business early on, we fell into that trap, of course, that we didn't know any better. So we had great, pretty photos, but no one was able to find them. So what did that mean for our work and for our business and for our lead generation? It meant zero. And then we had the epiphany that, hey, wait a minute, we're getting asked the same questions all the time, you know? Some of our blogs, our best written blogs, our best performing blogs came about because we got um, questions from our couples. Like, hey, what's a venue you recommend in Lake Como? And it sounds like a dumb, silly question, but it's not because everyone has that same question. They've never been here, they've never traveled here, they've never experienced this place, and we live here. And so it came about by writing just a long email and saving that in our drafts and updating it every couple of weeks when we got new questions. And then it evolved and turned into like, hey, wait a minute. I don't have to keep sending the same email to a million different people. I can actually post this on the internet and have people view it. It's like, holy shit, I didn't know I could do that, right? And so once you have that epiphany and that mindset shift, or just realizing that the internet is searchable, like you realize that many people have the same problem. And the way we accomplished it, the way we provided values, we wrote about it, like from a genuine perspective of, hey, we live here, we know these places, and they're beautiful. Like, here are the pros and cons. And so I feel like that's where all the photographers kind of need to get to at some point, especially if you want to kind of you want to have your work found, you know, being a amazing, wonderful photographer is great, but if no one can find you, it's just like a tragedy. Um, so you know, when we talk about like serving a market versus creating a market, you know, when I think about serving a market, I feel like when we talk about our Lake Como specialty, Lily and I, as being based in Lake Como, wedding photographers, like we had that need. We knew it existed because we're getting asked that from our couples. You know, it's an existing market. Lake Como is not new, but certainly is a hotspot. And so we provide value based on that. What's the difference? Like, what then is creating a market? Like, how the heck does that even happen? What are we talking about really?
Okay, so here's a question for you. How many weddings do you think happen at Lake Como in a year?
Sure. You know, you know, because I'm wearing my engineering hat now as we talk, right? So if I think about the number of villas, I'd say we've got about, you know, let's say 40 or let's say 50 villas around the lake because the math is easier. And I would say we've got a wedding season from April until October. So how many months is that? April, May, June, July, August, blah, blah. Let's call it 8 months. So 8 months, I would say maybe 2 weddings a week. So that's 50 times two is 100 times, what did we say? 8 months? I already lost my math. But it's probably a lot, probably a couple thousand, you know?
Out of those weddings, how many do you think are qualified leads for you, for the business model that you're running?
Sure. I'd probably say half of those are qualified leads just based on the venues and the budgets they typically work with starting like entry point. It's probably half of those, if not more.
Okay, that's more than I was expecting you to say. Um, I think my bigger, or the thing that drove me to think, hey, let's talk about creating market versus serving a market. I think it's that your SEO strategy. So again, just through my lens of thinking about SEO, your SEO strategy needs to match your business model. Okay, and I think that a lot of times,
What does that mean? When you say your SEO needs to match your business model, what do you mean exactly?
when photographers come to me, often their main goal is to rank for location specialty photographer on the first page. If they can get in the first three for that, they're like happy. That's success with SEO.
So it'd be like Lake Como wedding photographer, or it'd be like Colorado wedding photographer, something of that sort, right?
And if you are a let's say you're a luxury wedding photographer in Lake Como who's trying to target the highest end of the market, right? And you only want a specific kind of client. And you know that it's not, no, and it sounds like in Lake Como, maybe it is most of them or half of them or something like that. But let's just say that it's a small percentage, 10% of the market that you're trying to target. Ranking for Lake Como wedding photographer probably isn't the thing that's going to drive meaningful traffic that's going to convert to your website. Versus, let's say I'm in, so I'm in South Carolina. Let's say Charleston wedding photographer. I would say maybe 10 or 20,000 weddings happen in Charleston every year, maybe more. And my business model could be that I don't want to serve the highest end of that. I want to serve the middle market, or I want to try to do a certain amount of volume. But the point is, like, let's say I want to do 20 weddings out of 10,000. It's a much different strategy for me to find 20 people out of 10,000 people than it would be for someone who's trying to find 10 people out of 100 people. So again, maybe the extremes, but the idea is that often trying to rank for location specialty photographer isn't the thing that's going to actually make a big difference for you, because most of the people who are going to Google and typing that in are likely looking for budget friendly. They're likely looking for comparison. They're in a different mindset than someone who is planning an extravagant wedding, or who is, there's a whole bunch of different things that people could do.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is that you need to know who you're serving essentially, right? You can't be like you actually have to know your business model, who you're serving, how you serve them, and then how you best fit for them, right? It's not like you're just trying to speak with everyone. You're not trying to capture all 10,000 weddings in Charleston. You're focusing on those 20, and those 20 are probably very, very specific in what their need and what their wants are. And that has to align with what you provide. Okay. So it's a bit of a shift in how you approach, like, I'm not just a wedding photographer, I'm a wedding photographer for a very specific niche clientele, market, sector that's unique.
See, that what you just said, I think that is the part when I'm talking about creating a market. I'm talking about trying to carve out a name for yourself in those very, very specific parameters. So you decide that you're only going to do this kind of work in this location for this type of client, and you get very specific about it. And then you try to, it's not necessarily that, like, let's say those 10,000 people who were searching Google for Charleston wedding photographer, they didn't necessarily know that they wanted X, Y, and Z that you're offering, but you have to convince them. You have to kind of create that market, where I would say most of those people know, I want pictures from my wedding. Like, but that's very generic, right? That's a market that already exists. There's people who they know they're getting married, they know that they want to document it, and they know that most people hire a photographer, and that those basics, that's an existing market. You can serve that pretty easily, right? Like, you really probably do want to rank for Charleston wedding photographer because you're serving the most generic demand, and that's a valid business model. I think from an SEO perspective, I'm actually often very happy when someone like that comes to me, because I'm like, oh yeah, well, you can do very well with SEO if you're willing to compete on price to some extent. You have the capacity to do volume profitably. You are able to make it very easy for someone to book you, and the process for getting that done is just painless. uh, that does very well in search for the generic terms, because Google knows that a vast majority of the people who are searching are looking for that mainstream thing. So when you're serving that kind of existing market, it's totally fine to make a business that serves the majority of those people. Now, like I said, there's like caveats. You do have to be able to be profitable, and having that capacity. Like, it's a different kind of business model. But I do know quite a few people who do it very successfully, and often they just find it very easy to rank on Google, because again, that's what a lot of searchers are looking for. Versus creating a market, it's something that people don't know that they're searching for. And whenever they are looking through the results, they need to be convinced. They need to have some sort of, I guess, I don't know, not always. I don't know. I feel like I'm a little lost on my own distinction between the two. When I was thinking about this earlier, I was like, there's a lot of crossover
Yeah,
too.
you're serving a bit of a, it's like going mainstream to niche a bit, isn't it? It's like you can serve the masses, and that's a valid business model. There are nuances to it, like you said. You have to be profitable, obviously. And sometimes when you're in that mid-market, you tend to sometimes have to fight on price. You have to be competitive. People aren't necessarily looking for a great value, perhaps. And when you talk about creating a market or being super niched, like, are people searching for a super fashionable wedding photographer like Como? Probably not. But deep down they go, "Oh wait, that's really what I wanted." So then, how's that convincing process go about? If someone's looking for a Lake Como photographer, they don't necessarily know I want X, Y, and Z yet. How is it then that you convey that benefit, that value to them?
Actually, I want to hear some of your insights on that. Like, what are some of the things that you have been able to do to set yourself apart, like carve out that market for Lake Como? I do have a few thoughts on what are the kind of SEO strategies that go into it, but what are some of the things that you think have been most important?
What I found, and as so when we had Lily Red initially, we went through a rebrand back in 2020 during COVID, and we said, okay, we've got nothing to do here except eat ice cream on the sofa, but we can't just do that forever because we're getting too fat. So let's think about our business and how we want to come out of this COVID, because COVID won't last forever. But it's a great period for us to reset and think about what the heck is it we're doing, and why do people care? And so we went back to the drawing board and the brand and said, okay, who is Lily? What does she do? Why is she so special? She's full of energy. She's bold. She's not minimalist. She's 100% maximalist. We have stuff everywhere in the house that's curated, vintage, and that's her personality. And so, why isn't that reflected in the brand and who we want to attract as our client and our couple? And what we found is that as soon as we embraced, like really, really embraced who Lily is as a person, to some extent who I am behind the scenes, like once we embraced that, we started attracting people who aligned with those values, right? And that was kind of our magic formula. So instead of trying to think of like ideal client avatars and they are in New York and they work in finance, like let's yes, that is going to be our client in the end to some extent, but it's also based on shared values and shared principles and a love for the same things. So we started there. Then we layered that on top of, okay, we know at some point we want to move back to Italy because that's Lily's hometown where she was born and raised, and that's where we want to spend time as we get older. And so we said, okay, does that like do who we are as a brand like do we who I don't know if that makes sense in English, but it's grammatically correct, but you get the point. Like is that who we are? And does that align with where we want to work? Can that be represented in like Como? And the answer was yes. We found a particular niche of couples who want that experience, who want to come from United States to Italy and have that Bella Vita experience. It's their first or second time in Italy, but they feel a connection there. They love the lifestyle, they love the culture, they love the design, they love the food. And we're like, hey, we can show our couples that because we are that, on some form or another. We are a version of that. And we've happened to live in both places, so we have this expertise. And so once we realize that, hey, we understand who we are in terms of values, we understand that our market potentially does exist. Now we're like, okay, and then this goes back to the example of, hey, we're getting asked these same questions over and over. So maybe we can actually write something valuable or share some content that makes sense for this type of market, right? And then we just kept leaning into that over and over and over. The first blog breeds the second and third. Then we think, okay, what does content marketing mean? It's not just long form written word or blogs. It also means other stuff. It also means social media content. It means a whole bunch of stuff. Like, so once you start to open that door, you go, wait a minute, content is like it's literally everything we produce and consume to some extent, isn't it? Like where does the line end? Like you could do videos, testimonial, blah blah blah. It just never ends. And so we're like, okay, that's interesting. People are actually reading the blog. I didn't know people would care. Like, okay, so now we overlay a funnel on top of it, right? So now people know we exist, and then we start to capture them via leads and via freebies. Like, oh, like holy shit, there's a marketing system. I didn't know you could do this. And so like every time you open a door, I feel like through whatever it might be, through social or long form blog or like providing it's just providing value. At some point someone has that same question or same they want to know something and you perhaps have the answer. So that, for me that's what content is. And then when we talk about like creating a market, we're just embracing stuff we love. Like that's really it. We're just really embracing who we are as people, as characters, and representing that as a brand. That I think that's why it's so easy for us. We don't have to figure stuff out. We just have to really understand what we love. And because we live in 2024 and not like 2004, we have the ability to put stuff on the internet. We have the ability to market. We have the ability to reach. Previously that probably wasn't true at all. Like we didn't have that ability. But now that we do, like why would we not take advantage of it?
Yeah, totally. What do you think are, well, first of all, going back to your early days in the blog when you were making those first blog posts, did you have any sort of specific mindset on like, here are the kinds of topics that are going to get traffic? Or were you like, no, here's just some questions we're going to answer?
That was literally it. Here are questions we've been asked, and I'm tired of sending emails. Let me put this on a blog. Like literally, that was it. That was the thought process. It was through the pure nature of um, like serving and answering and fulfilling a need. And then like I would say like the strategy part came afterwards, honestly. It just came because we needed to. I got tired of sending so many emails.
Yeah, that makes sense. Whenever people search for Lake Como wedding photographer, well, first of all, are they finding your site? Are you ranking for?
I don't even think we are, honestly. I don't even think we show up in the top like 20 or something. But we drive so much traffic through the other means because people are searching for top venues in Lake Como, or honestly, like, where to go eat in Lake Como. Like that we rank for those types of topics, not necessarily for wedding photographer Lake Como.
Yeah.
Yeah, so point in case, I think that yeah, that was it. That you're absolutely right. When people were searching for us, they're not searching for Lake Como wedding photographer. They're searching for everything related to it.
When the people do search for Lake Como wedding photographer, are they in a different sort of mindset? I mean, of course, they're a different mindset than someone who searches for like where to eat in Lake Como. Um, Maybe even someone searching for venues is earlier in the process of planning than someone who searches like Como wedding photographer who might be ready to buy now. And it's funny because you could even go further back than that, and that's an interesting exercise that I've been trying lately is thinking like where did this problem originate, or like where did it start, or where did the dream start? Or so for example, you might have like the top 15 wedding venues in Lake Como. I think that's actually exactly what you have on your post. Yeah. Yeah, I think I saw that. And then you could back up a step, right, and say like the most luxurious wedding destinations in Italy, and Lake Como is one of those, right? Or you could back up a step even further and say like where to have dream weddings in Europe.
I love this thought process that you're going on right now because you're thinking as a consumer and as a potential client or couple. It's like, hey, yes, I'm searching for top wedding venues in Lake Como, but how did I arrive there? How did I even get to the point of having to think about Lake Como? Maybe the previous step or the level up is like, hey, I want to I think maybe where to get married in Italy, where to get married in Europe, where to get married that's not the U.S. And so, like, to arrive to Lake Como, you've had to go through a series of decisions, a series of information, a series of values, like to get to that point. And so, what you're saying is, hey, maybe you can also think about capturing an even wider audience, like where to get married in general, or what are trends for, like, there's so many different avenues to pursue in terms of like great valuable content.
Yeah, I had a client recently in Spain, and they were trying to figure out like what is the angle, like how are we going to break into this market and find the right kind of people for me. And we were talking, and it eventually came out that this person was really into like adventure sports, things like surfing and rock climbing and things like that. And they did mostly or wanted to do elopements. And we were thinking through the type of couple that is going to elope in Spain and also wants to make sure that they get in their rock climbing or surfing while they're on that trip is a very different person than the person who's trying to have a 200-person destination wedding in Spain, where they need to fly in their grandma and everything has to be like super accessible, and they need it to be, have plenty of accommodations and things like that. It's just a very different kind of mindset, which leads to creating very different kind of content, I think was interesting.
Yeah, because not everyone reads the same blog or gets the same value from it, you know. When we talk about, you know, that's such a specific niche, the surfing and the rock climbing and the adventure elopement part of it, but it's so particular. I bet this person is just a boss at what they do. They know everything about it, you know? And so it's putting that value into the world because we can attract those type of like-minded individuals nowadays.
Right. And the things that you write are going to resonate with that kind of person exactly because you know it and you love it.
So when you get those types of clients, you know, like, hey, I want to rank for something in eventual elopement Spain. Is it a process of, do they already know who their clients are? Are you helping guide them through that conversation and be like, hey, you really need to identify who you're serving, and then then we can write something to serve them?
I do think it's a step that a lot of photographers are skipping, or maybe intuitively they spend time thinking about it, but they don't necessarily take the time to write it down or to like really explore it. Like you were saying, when you were sitting on the couch during COVID, you were thinking like, what is it that makes Lily unique? And I imagine you did some brainstorming together and you probably wrote some of this stuff down and you started exploring these avenues. I think a lot of people just they like come up with something one time and they're able, they run their business and make their decisions based on this one assumption, and they haven't like fully explored all the options. um, it's pretty interesting to find that often the conversations that I have, we're able to come up with something that uh, lets someone feel like they have a unique angle. I don't know, I guess a lot of photographers want to do something that's unique or different, and often it's they lean into like their work, their photography being different, or maybe their website, the way that they do the design of the website being different. um, I don't know, I don't see a lot of people who are leaning into like serving a very specific kind of audience, or leaning on their personality to be the thing that makes them different. There is definitely some, I see a lot of examples of it, but it's not necessarily the norm across the industry.
That's probably a shift that's going to come sooner rather than later. And it's because there's a new photographer, I think, being born every day. Not to discredit the photography industry, but just the barrier to entry is really low, you know? We went from analog to digital, we went from digital even to iPhone to some extent. It's so easy to become a photographer. And now, especially with AI, the introduction of that element, the barriers to entry are always getting lower and lower. So then how are we going to differentiate ourselves? What makes us unique? What makes us special? What makes us the next the thing people want? And I think that's embracing your personality. It's kind of embracing that personal brand aspect of being a photographer. You know, so many photographers use their name as their business. You know, that inherently makes you a personal brand, whether you like it or not. And then we shy away from actually showing ourselves in our personal brand aspects, you know?
It's funny because I thought that exact same thing. I did a survey in my group recently, and I asked whether people considered their website to be their business website or their personal website. And I was thinking, because most photographers are using their name as their business name, I was expecting to see more people say they see it as their personal website and photography is the thing that they post there. But it was like 7% versus 93%, 93 saying they thought it was their business website. Very separated, the business and the personal aspect for those photographers in that poll. It was really interesting.
You know, I feel like, I feel like Lily and I kind of take that for granted because we did make that shift and say, hey, you know what? The brand is her name. She is the brand. And that's why people book her. There are so many amazing photographers. Like, golly, we were at some conferences in the past couple of weeks. I was like, holy shit, these people are amazing. But no one knows who they are, or they can't be found. You know, and that's like the artist's the struggle. It's like you produce amazing work and then you get famous for it 200 years later when you're dead, right? And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to run a successful and profitable business so we can have this life that we want and desire. And so I think we connect with other photographers or other couples by knowing them, by letting them know us about what we do, how we do it, why we do it, what we love, what we don't love, how we work. And I love the word you used earlier was unique. Like how are you unique? If you've got 10 photographers that are all similar in style or approach, perhaps emotional, adventurous, whatever word you want to use, luxury, how then are we differentiating ourselves if not through our personalities and our values and who we are as people, like as personal brands? Um, and I feel like the sooner we recognize that and do it, it's going to make your work a lot more fun too, because you're connecting with people who are like, oh, wait a minute, we get along. We can actually do this. It's like an epiphany to have.
I agree. Do you think that uh, I had this note about comparison mode? So, like, whenever a photographer or whenever someone's searching for a photographer, I think most Google users often, I shouldn't say most Google users, I think a lot of people who use Google regularly are opening multiple results, like in different tabs, and then like looking at each one, or they'll look at one, go back, come back to the results, look at another. I think this is pretty typical user.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how myself, I'll search for something and I'll open 50 billion thousand tabs and I'll spend about zero point 0.5 seconds and within the zero point 0.5 seconds or however long it is, do you capture my like do you catch my curiosity? Is something about here going to resonate with me, or was it like did you spend no effort on this and I didn't even know if it's the right page or not, like,
That part right there, what you just said, I think that's such a key thing I've been trying to tell people lately about SEO is like the first thing you need to do when someone lands on your website is tell them that they're in the right place. But one of the things that's key to that is understanding where they just came from. So the interesting thing, I was having this conversation with someone at WPPI because we were talking about running Facebook ads, and we were talking about how landing pages for Facebook ads versus landing pages for search engines might be different. We ended up deciding that there's a lot of similarities, but the main difference is just where they came from and what was their mindset when they were there. Where the person who was searching was actively looking for something specific, the person who came from the Facebook ad was not. And the mindset that they're in whenever they click that link and what they're expecting to see first is a little bit different. And that's really an interesting distinction. It's interesting that you said you sometimes only take half a second. That's important to know, and it's important to know that if they came from a specific place looking for a specific thing, and you don't let them know that it's not very apparent to them that that thing is going to be on this page, it's likely they're going to leave. So that's really interesting.
I think that's a fascinating like it's something interesting to notice, because we go back to the example of, hey, photographers think that photography speaks more than words, and to some level it does. But I understand I land on a photography page and you don't tell me who you are or something like, am I the right person to be here? Like, are you the right photographer for me right away so I can explore further? Like, you've already lost my interest because I've got 20 other tabs open. I'm trying to go through them as quickly as possible. I'm trying to narrow down that search field um, to know if it's the best fit for me.
Okay, so here's an interesting question. Do you have any intuition about, let's say that I am the searcher and I go and search for Lake Como wedding photographers. Let's just assume that you're ranking in the top 10 and I open up 9 other websites and yours and I'm looking. Do you have any intuition about what I would be expecting to find as a searcher using Google in that particular case?
So if I'm searching for a Lake Como wedding photographer, what am I expecting to find as like my search example, right? Typically what we see is like, hey, I'm a Lake Como wedding photographer. Here's my example of how awesome Lake Como is. Here's my example of my work, why I'm the best for it. And then give me a way to like, if you sold me on the pitch and I buy into that, I probably want to learn a little bit more about you, or it depends on what phase I'm buying. I mean, am I ready to buy, or am I just searching at who's the best option? But I feel like I want to see right away, are you for me? Like, are you the right photographer for me? Like, through vibe, style, something catches my eye where I'm willing to spend the next minute or two to learn a little bit more about you. So then sell me on your personality, like connect with me. I got to know you're my people, right? It's not going to be some super awkward conversation or we just don't click. Like, tell me you're my people, show me some cool work just to remind me how cool and great you are. And then from there, maybe I want a freebie, maybe I want to contact me. It just depends on what phase I'm in. So I feel like I want to be, I just want to know who you are, right? Because I'm sure as I browse the website, I see the work and things like that. Like, I want to know who you are. Like, can I trust you? Are you who you say you are? Are you legit? Do you get me? Can I trust you? And once I have that, I'm like, okay.
So what's the opposite of that? Like, what would be some things that would tell someone immediately that you're not for me? Can you think of things like, try to think of your market or like who's there? If I'm
Absolutely, I've already got it for you. Some if it's impersonal, if I feel like you took a copy paste landing page, you changed out the word Lake Como for Charleston, and it's the same page. If I feel like it's impersonal, if I feel like you're not really providing any value to me, you're just kind of copying and pasting buzzwords, and I don't feel like I learned anything from the conversation. I didn't learn about your expertise in the location. I didn't learn about some of your history. I didn't learn about there was nothing valuable for me. It was just like junk filler words. It's like you're telling me about how many villas are in Lake Como. I don't care how many villas are in Lake Como. I just want to know what your experience is working at them. Like show me you're the boss of it. Show me you're the authority. And so oftentimes you'll see a lot of landing pages that are like just seem really generic, and it's a little bit off-putting because I want to learn a little bit about you and why you're the best fit, not necessarily why your page is ranking better.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a completely different direction question for you, if you don't mind. Um, I want to hear your thoughts about how important it has been for you, especially for Lily's photography business, to get featured, like publications.
I would say Lily changed her business back in 2016 initially, right? That's when she changed her clientele and really pivoted into creating content being style shoots and blogs and submissions and portfolio to kind of just understand who she is as an artist, as a photographer, and what she loved and what she didn't love. And part of that process of creating that content, style shoots and whatnot, was getting her work featured. I think one of her first publications ever was like a green wedding shoes or Style Me Pretty. This is back in like 2016 or 2017. And that was fundamental for pivoting and changing our business because all of a sudden it was authority and validation. Like what you're doing, what you're creating, what you're detailing, what you're designing, people actually could care about. And so that was great authority for us as a brand as we're kind of essentially firing all of our past clients and changing them. And then it also created that portfolio content for us that we could showcase going forward. And having that published in blogs, well, I mean, it was frustrating as hell. These blogs get 300-400 submissions per week. And so to be able to be featured in one of their work or their publication was great for us. It was really, really strong building point. Then at some point your portfolio work, your content work turns into real clients and real work, and it just starts that momentum. Like the momentum is what that gave us.
Yeah, I just I brought it up because I feel like it's an understated strategy for the industry as a whole, for a lot of photographers, especially wedding photographers. When it comes to SEO, having links from all of the biggest and most popular wedding publications is a huge deal. Like, it makes a very, very big difference in your ability to be competitive, especially in high competition markets. And like you said, like, it's something that can build momentum into getting you the kind of, like, you're showing the examples of what you want to create, and it attracts people who want you to create that for them. Something that, I don't know, I just feel like a lot of people miss that as a, well, I've talked to a lot of photographers who I mentioned that they should think about getting published or getting featured. They're like, my work's not the kind that they're going to accept, and they just kind of move on. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, what would you say to that person?
Absolutely. I love that question because it takes a little bit of it's like the artist frustration, you know. My work's good, but it's not good enough. I have a comparison game. Should I waste my time? And especially if you don't get featured right away, it's really, really demoralizing. You know, I remember when Lily got her first feature, she was screaming, yelling up and down like how amazing it was because she was that excited about it. So she had gone through that many failures, you know. It wasn't like the first time she submitted, she got published. It was like the 10th time. It was something ridiculous, you know. And it's really demoralizing, but that first one builds momentum for the second and the third. And none of us were born with publications under our belt, right? Like we had to publish our first work, which we look back on, it's like, wow, we photographed that. Like that's where we started from. But yeah, that's where you started from. We had to start from that point to get the momentum to get the work we have now. And so if it's not the first publication, it'll be a second, third, fourth, or fifth, and it doesn't mean they get published in the biggest names right away. But even those smaller blogs, more localized, more regional, maybe even just smaller names are not bad options too. Get your work out there. Like if your work isn't seen by anybody, then what's the value of it really? No matter how amazing it might be.
Yeah. Okay. Another completely different turn. Something we had talked about before that was an interesting topic to me was the trend of adventure elopement photography, and then sort of um, a little bit of pushback to that now, to being more like full scale luxury weddings.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I feel like elopement photography started back at what 2017ish, 2016ish even, you know, and it was such a hot new thing. I was like, holy shit, you can get married on top of a mountain. And it was like, oh wow, everything just clicked for so many people because they have that background, that history, that experience, that desire. And especially with photography being such a low barrier to entry. It's like there's so many new elopement photographers born. I think it's great for so many people, especially for there's a shift um, for smaller weddings, for more boutique, and just different experiences. People want experiences nowadays, and so I think it's such an interesting market because it's also so saturated now. It seems like every new photographer is an elopement photographer, and so it's like that double-edged sword because now you have such access to beautiful parks and places you didn't know you can get married or eloped at, and all of a sudden every photographer and their mom is there. So it's like you've seen a saturation, maybe a tipping point in it where maybe it's not so novel and unique anymore. And so where does that energy and those new photographers go? From my side, I've seen it go to luxury. You know, it seems like everyone now is the buzzword is luxury because it's we realize it's a more resilient market. You know, when there's economic downturns or slowdowns or risk, yes, there's still a slowdown in the overall market, but you know, your high-end couples tend to be more insulated from those types of bumps and nuances. And so you see a lot of photographers who don't, you know, luxury is kind of it's a tricky word. So what does that mean? Does it mean really expensive? But what's really expensive to me and you versus somebody else, right? You know, who is that client? What do they do? And what do they consider luxury? You know, luxury weddings, I think for photography start at 20,000. Like once you think of like true luxury and scale up to the 50 and 100Ks, right? But how accessible is that for most people and most photographers? I guess probably not. Like to be in that type of market is such a brand presence and experience to provide because there's such a high expectation on you. Um, and so I think there's a desire for people in general to kind of just move from mid market to something a little bit higher end, and higher end meaning just a bit more priority for photography and experience. But maybe you see people aiming for luxury and fall there, which isn't a bad place to be actually.
Yeah, it was interesting. I brought it up because when I was thinking earlier about creating a market, I thought that the elopement situation was an interesting case study of sort of creating a market. Obviously, elopements have been around for a long time, but even now, whenever I look at the search intent behind someone searching for anything related to eloping or elopement, in most parts of the United States, at least, I find that most people mean they want to get married without their family being involved. They want to they're trying to they want to get legally married. They want to go to the courthouse. They want to do something really simple, and they're not trying to do this like adventure elopement thing. But some of the bigger photographers in the time were trying to redefine that, right? And so you actually see a lot of these photographers show up if you search for something like elopement definition, and they're trying to rank for that because whenever someone is looking up something about elopement, because they're like, can I elope? Is that legal? Can I, I want to get married, but is eloping valid or whatever? They search for it. And one of the things that comes up are these photographers' websites that try to redefine eloping. It's like, no, eloping isn't just running away to the courthouse. Eloping is focusing on your connection and your love and celebrating that as a couple, maybe only the two of you or your closest friends or something like that.
That's so interesting. Yeah. And that goes back to the strategy we are talking previously, thinking more high level, right? Instead of thinking like your top 10 venues in X and Y place, what if you think, how did we even get to that point to begin with? And so that's going to your discussion of, hey, people are wondering in general, can I get eloped? Like, can I even do that? Is that a thing? And as they move down their journey and look for more information and nurture themselves, then they start to learn about the nuances, the details, locations, the venues. So you're talking something completely different. You're talking like, hey, let's talk about the definition of it. Like, what is it really? And that's such a different thought process because I don't think anyone thinks like that. Not many people think like, what's the real intent of understanding my searcher?
Right. I try to do the same thing for myself. It's more along the lines of I'm thinking about photographers and their websites, right? And so I try to back up to the point where it's like, when is the first time that a photographer thinks I need a website? And it's different times for different photographers. Sometimes they know that immediately before they start their business. They're like, hey, my website's going to be my main marketing thing. And they like go into it knowing they're going to build out their first website to be a marketing machine. Other people, they started taking pictures and they're like, I need a place to put these online. And there's other people who have a completely different experience. But each of those has a different need, a different problem when they go and they search for websites for photographers or best website platforms for photographers or some of the things that I try to rank for. And I think if I don't do the experiment of thinking back to who is that person, like why did they go and search that? What are they actually trying to solve? Like what was the thing that happened before this that gave them some pain in their life that they now need to resolve, and how can I help them resolve it? Just knowing that it's different for different people. But yeah, it's a good exercise to go through. I think especially when you're trying to, I don't know, I guess the whole idea of creating a market is just fascinating to me because like those pioneers in the elopement space, they had to do something like rank for the definition of elopement, or maybe the next step in was like elope in Colorado. And the person searching for that, they might want to know about legal stuff because you can self-solemnize in Colorado, or they might want to know about locations to elope. And so what was interesting, man, this makes me think of all kind of interesting trends. So what's interesting is in that time period, whenever more of the photographers were writing these like how to elope in location, these long guides that talked about the legalities and then the practical concerns about like weather and travel, and also a list of locations and maybe some other things. This really long ultimate guides were ranking very well. I'm starting to see right now in this space that the ultimate guides aren't ranking well for all of the different terms, and someone who's searching for where to elope in Colorado doesn't want that ultimate guide anymore. They don't want all of that extra information. They just want the list of places to elope in Colorado. But that searcher might not have existed 10 years ago. The person who was thinking about like, hey, I already know I want an adventure elopement in Colorado because that's a thing, and I'm going to go search for that specific part of this. Like before, it was like, no, I'm not even sure if is this even a thing. Elope in Colorado, so they go to Google to find out.
Wow. So we're almost like even like a now we've introduced like time into the equation, right? Because you're right. Maybe 10 years ago people didn't know what that was, but those blogs and education, that awareness has done such a great job. People now know it's a thing. And so like the mindset shift of that searcher is no longer, can I even elope? What is it? It's more about, I already know I can elope, but it's kind of general information in the world now. It's like I need that next piece of information in detail. So then that an opportunity to kind of take that ultimate guide format and like go and readapt it, or produce new content that fits the modern search queries.
It is. There are some people that are in our group that have been kind of talking about this, and we've been discussing like what's the best way? Should we break this apart? Should it be multiple pieces of content? And some I think are doing that, and I'm really interested to see like what the outcome of that is. I personally think that the more granular content will do better in the long term in Google search. I mean, we haven't even talked about AI and search and the way that Google is going with, but I think that ultimately the takeaway from that conversation would be that Google is going to try to personalize the search even further. They're going to try to get users to refine searches even more. So like right now, if you go to Google and you type something in, you look below it, almost always they're showing a ask a follow-up question field. They want people to follow up and try to be more specific. And so the people who have the more specific content on their site are the ones that Google is more likely to cite as the source for answering that question for the searcher right there in the search results. So I do think ultimately like going more specific with your content is probably a smart strategy. It's not going to be the right answer for every single person. Like I'm actually curious for you if you're thinking about like what's the phase where right now if you go and search for wedding venues like come on, when I searched earlier I saw you in like position 2 or 3. It was very close to the top. um, when let's say there's 50 new photographers who enter the market and write very compelling articles that are doing the same thing, what is what is the next phase deeper for you? Is there something that you take from that article and then break into something more specific? Is there deeper insight that you can give people that doesn't fit into that article?
I take that approach of, instead of going high level, we go kind of low level. And I feel like those listing blogs are a great starting point. But if you want the real nuances and details of like a particular location, I think that in itself could warrant um, that really nuanced content, like very, very specific content. Again, you're not going to be getting um, a million people searching for it. But if you're looking for that very, very nuanced, specific couple or bride, if you're looking for those 20 brides out of 10,000, maybe it's not such a bad way to approach it. And I'm really curious as to how AI flows into our new content strategy. If we're thinking that AI, Google search is going to be very personalized going forward, it's going to be very AI intensive. What does that mean really for how we produce content? Or do we want to get more granular as we think about what we do, or do we have to think about this from a holistic approach? Like there's still a need for maybe some higher level content, but I guess it's like having an overall strategy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's evolving over time. That's the only reason that I can exist as a consultant or someone who has a job, right? Because I'm trying to follow those trends and realize it's going to change. A lot of people talk about Google changing all the time, and the core fundamentals of Google search are really pretty much staying the same. Google is basing the results on how can we promote the most helpful content that will give the searcher what they're looking for as fast as possible from sources that we believe are reputable. Like that's the core of all of Google, right? That's going to stay the same. But exactly how they surface this stuff and how they present it in search and what factors they're looking for to decide on what something is authoritative, I think that stuff has to evolve, and we have to kind of follow where it's going, and it will change over time.
I think it just keeps getting better with time. It gets more particular and more personalized over time. I think we have to start with kind of like the concentric circles. At the center, you just have great, valuable content. Like if you don't have that, it doesn't matter what else you do. Like if you're missing that fundamental basis of it's great content and people find it valuable, it doesn't matter like the other stuff and the other layers. Um,
It's funny. Just yesterday, I was saying to someone, they were asking me about how to rank for a specific term, and they showed me an article that they had written. They're like, "I want to get this article to rank for this term," and I was like, well, honestly, the intent behind that term doesn't really match this article, but you should publish this article right now. Like, stop thinking, overthinking, like, which term am I going to rank for and how do I get keywords in this? Because this article, the way you wrote it, is very helpful. It's very much building a culture for your brand. It's very interesting. The people that read it are going to connect with you. Publish that. Publish 10 of those. Publish 100 of those. And then let's look and see what are the opportunities for you in, finding some more traffic. Like there's room for someone to think about SEO very strategically, right? To go and do analysis of your competitors and which backlinks do I need specifically, or looking at keyword volume for different topics and trying to pick the one that has the lowest amount of competition and the highest amount of volume. Certainly, that is part of the game, but in my opinion, that comes after you've already like really started to figure out what is my voice, what am I trying to say, who am I trying to reach, and you put a bunch of that out. It's like a lot of people who are talking about YouTube, they'll say you need to publish 50 to 100 videos that you hate before you even worry about how to like any strategy for growing your YouTube channel. And so I think similarly, I don't think you need to publish stuff that you hate. I think you should publish stuff that you think is good. But like you said about photography earlier, we look back at it and we say, that's where I started. When I look back at even my content from a year or two ago, I'm like, ooh, that's kind of cringy. But I posted it because that was part of the journey of figuring out why did I feel cringy about that a year later. Okay, I now can improve by doing this thing that will make it less cringy now.
I love that. It's kind of a journey, you know. You have to produce that content to understand your voice, who you are, what your values are, and they work in parallel. It's not that you're gonna magically know everything about your brand and your customers and clients right away, but as you produce that content, as it feels natural, organic, and as it gains some traffic, you understand like, oh wait a minute, that's who I am. Now I get it, and then you can start to at least have that conversation with yourself. And I feel like a lot of us don't necessarily go on that journey and do the inner work or find out who we are or who we're trying to really speak to. Like really, really, like what are people, I think it's something you said earlier, what are they really actually searching for? Like really, if you really, really think about it, it's not, no, they're not searching the top venues, but like what are they really going after? Like what do they really want?
Right. They want a certain look for their wedding that is going to represent who they are to the people that they care about.
Yeah, it's yeah, you're getting deep. You get into the internal problems of who they are and what they're facing, not just the external search. So, um, I think it's a fantastic conversation. Like, God bless, we could go on this forever, couldn't we? There's so many layers. There's so many layers to it. Because every time you think you got it, it's like, oh, wait a minute. There's so much going on behind the scenes and understanding who and what we are. Um, do you have any parting words for that you want to leave on about creating a market or anything to inspire us?
I think the last thing I said was kind of the parting word. It's like go publish some stuff. Like to really start to explore it. You need to do some writing and put it out on paper or digital or whatever and like get it out, because I think for me at least, seeing it externally helps me process and refine and make it better. So that would be my encouragement for people would be whatever it is that you think you want to do, start writing it down and publishing, put it in public and start doing it, and the path will make itself clear.
Fantastic. I love that clarity for people. Where can they find you? Where do they learn about you, your course, and what's going on with Fuel Your Photos?
Yeah, so fuelyourphotos.com has the course and some free SEO resources, and you can find our Facebook group there. We have a podcast. And then I have CoryPotter.com for it's like a personal blog. I'm trying to revive it right now. So I'm trying to do some of the stuff that I'm talking about here with like just putting stuff out in public. Hopefully have some new stuff coming there too.
Awesome. Give Cory a follow and thank you for being on. I appreciate it.